Hey everybody, welcome to JFrog DevSecOps 101. Today is slightly different than we normally do, where we actually show things like demonstrations, best practices, and whatnot. I'm actually super excited for this discussion today because there's been a lot of talk about a project that we're going to mention today, and we actually have the lead of it, who's part of JFrog, but also for the greater good of the community, we have Sudhindra. But before I do that, let me explain to you who I am. My name is Bill Manning, or William Manning, whatever you want to say. I am actually the manager for solution engineering for the Americas for our new business team. My job is to work with our customers, become a trusted advisor to make sure that they're really fulfilling the needs of their DevSecOps experience. Sudhindra, why don't you introduce yourself, my friend? It's so good to have you here.
Yeah, good to have talk to you, Bill. I am Sudhindra Rao. I joined JFrog about a couple of years ago, and I started working with JFrog products. And soon we started realizing the issues that people are facing in the DevOps world. And that's when we started working on this project, which we are calling Pyrsia. And Pyrsia is supposed to be an answer to the problems faced in open source supply chain security. And I'm
what are some of
leading
those
the team
problems, by the way?
Yeah. So I can start elaborating on what those problems are. So the problems are that we trust open source very much blindly, and we don't have a way to figure out if that open source came from a legitimate place. Was it tested correctly? Was it actually built by the person who they claim they are? And all those questions arise. And that eventually leads to vulnerabilities that are later exposed and exploited by malicious users, and thus causing irreparable damage to society. Society causing financial damage, causing data leaks and whatnot. If you remember the Equifax data leak that happened because Apache struts and open source library was not patched, and that was exploited, and pretty much everyone's credit card information is out there since 2017. And similar attacks have happened time and again. Everyone remembers the SolarWinds attack. I don't need to say more about it, about how much damage it has caused. It has actually caused so much damage that the White House has sprung into action and set up a committee to fix this problem from all the way from building this software to all the way to using it.
Yeah, and that's the idea. Like, yeah, last year, May of 20, actually, it was over a year ago now. The idea the Biden administration came out with improving the nation's, supply chain security problem, right? And actually, it was Section 4 that brought up the idea of software bill of materials, so you have accountability and whatnot. And I'm really glad you brought up the whole thing of the third-party transitive dependencies, right? I mean, 85 to 90% of the software that software developers use. Now, the thing is, too, is coders are artisans, right? They're masters of their craft. And the thing is that, when they make their artwork, the code that they do to produce products, the thing is the palette that they use is those third-party transit dependencies. And at the same time, we don't want to remove the idea of naivety, right? So the ability for it to be creative and naive, but at the same time, we want that to still have a level of security. Of course, with JFrog, we have our X-ray product, right? Everything from shift left through the CI process down to the delivery process. But also preemptively, it sounds like Pyrsia needs to fill that need of the systemic issues that are actually beyond that. Like I always like to say, beyond shift left or before shift left, right? This is really where everything starts to take place. And the thing is that, definitely the supply chain security was the catalyst of this. But, compared to, current methodologies of these repositories, whether it's Python or NPM or Docker or, any of these third-party transitive repositories out in the world that are maintained by the community, what's the biggest change between the way things are currently done and the way that Pyrsia does? Because Pyrsia, it sounds like it does a lot more than just store the binaries like the current repository structures. And there are some levels of security in some of these, but not to the extent that it sounds like you're willing to introduce with Pyrsia to address this. Can you explain?
Yeah. So one of the issues that has happened, and again, when I say one of these issues, every single of these issues have affected the software ecosystem deeply. NPM, PyPy, and other software repositories have have been down and are not available for significant
Trust.
period of time, they have been just inoperable, and that has caused people to just stop development, stop sending their software to production, and all this because an open source library cannot be downloaded. We cannot have this in the future, right? And we are already living in a much more distributed world today. So Pyrsia will leverage those distributed mechanisms of distributing these binaries widely, so that a single point of failure will not affect your CD process. You can still publish your software even if there is a single point of failure, right? And Pyrsia is building over the peer-to-peer technology so that this delivery becomes more efficient, more reliable. You can have, think Git for binaries, right? You don't have to have GitHub up and running if you want to work. You can always go to a peer and download that if there has been a network failure, right? So Pyrsia aims to do that. The other problem is that when you actually when an open source software developer builds something and builds the end binary, they just publish the binary to the repository, and we just trust them blindly, right? What if they built something and their credentials were compromised, and somebody else built a new version of it, of a new commit? There is no link between the new version and the commit, right? And what happens for a naive user is they're going to download the new version, which is going to be malicious, and that is going to disrupt their supply chain. It is going to push malicious software into all their users' computers, right? Think about those scenarios.
Would this also combat things like typo squatting and dependency confusion too?
Yes. So Pyrsia will establish a link between the source and the end product and open source binary, and it will certify it and write it to an immutable ledger, so that you can go ahead and verify and establish that trust. Pyrsia will provide you all the information so that you can establish that trust, instead of blindly relying on saying, oh, this came from this big repository and I should trust it by default. There's no reason to do that today, but we just do it because we don't have an option, and Pyrsia is going to provide that option now.
Well, it's funny is that you mentioned that, because one of the other key factors of this is that one of the problems that we see, and I see a lot of the times with me dealing with our current customer base and new customer base, by the way, is that there's a lot of this inherent distrust with those third-party transitive dependencies. And there are still a lot of companies out there that need to go through their, there's InfoSec teams or whatnot, and say, you shouldn't be, they're like, you can't access these binaries directly until the security team gets involved. And of course, at JFrog with X-Ray and stuff, we've actually helped expedite that capabilities by ensuring security at the front level. But it sounds like in this case with Pyrsia, this is actually looking to establish to say, hey, by the way, these things that you're inherently getting will now be trustworthy because of some of the things that that Pyrsia is looking to put in place. And when you were building this, what was some of the biggest hurdles that you came across while you were trying to build this way of establishing a trust model in which you can go ahead and vet and solidify that these binaries should be trusted because they've gone through the process? What were some of the things that really set this apart from everything else?
Fundamentally, there is a lack of mechanism, right? Fundamentally, we just trust whatever mechanism has been set up by NPM or PyPy, saying that, oh, they have two-factor authentication, they have this GPG key, and they only allow me as the maintainer of my open source software to push a particular binary. And we just implicitly trust what has been there. But there is nothing that confirms. And this is what is different between how people use build software internally, the homegrown software, as we call it. They have teams which they trust, or they can talk to the developer and ascertain that, okay, they built this binary from this Git SHA and there is a connectivity. They ran all these tests and it makes sure that the application actually works. This kind of emphasis on the process is completely missing in the open source world. So starting to establish that, okay, where is the chain of trust? The chain of trust is, okay, take this Git SHA, now run it on an independent machine. Make sure you run it on multiple independent machines so that you can get the same result. Once you have the same result, stamp it and put it somewhere so that somebody can go back and trace that back and say, okay, you did this, you did these 3 steps. So now I have this way to establish that trust. When you actually build software, bill of materials, I love your cake analogy. No, I would like to know where the ingredients of the cake came from, right? The same analogy applies to building open source software. I would like to know where it came from.
It's funny you mentioned that, because actually that's one of the things I was actually updating my talk on my cake analogy. And those of you who have never seen my talk on software bill of materials, we actually have a bunch of those in our JFrog YouTube channel. But one of the things is that I was like, I want to know, that, the stuff that I'm using is organic. Right. Or, the stuff I'm using, doesn't, really is what it says it is, I'm not, using some sort of knockoff on something that may not give me the results that I want. And that's the thing, is that when I started getting introduced to the idea of Pyrsia, I love the idea of now, not only is this the materials that are being used, like the cake analogy, the ingredients, right? Because initially came from the FDA anyway, this idea of software bill of materials, but I also want to know, how was it, before I get that box for those ingredients, where did it come from? What, exactly. Right? Was this cruelty free? Like all these words you hear all the time, right?
Yeah. And the same emphasis that we put on our health needs to be put on our software, because guess what? That software determines our health in many cases. I worked for a company that managed data for people with diabetes. This is the software that is driving how good their own management is going to be, right? Yeah. And we need to put that same emphasis, that we need to know where it came from, what is in it, how vulnerable it is, how many days has it been since the last vulnerability was found, right? And what is my corrective action? How do I fix it? I need to know that. That is what Pyrsia will provide. Pyrsia will provide you a ledger. It will say, this version that you have deployed is good, but it has this one vulnerability. Now you should upgrade to this one because this vulnerability has been fixed. We have tested it, etc., right? You want that.
Yeah, and it's like what you said before. I mean, we all know about SolarWinds, right? But what made it so nasty was it was a fourth level transitive indirect dependency. This is a dependency of a dependency of a dependency that came in sneakily under the radar, right? And would a Pyrsia be able to, address that, because it would be a non-trusted entity, correct?
Yeah, correct. Yeah. And here's the other challenge, right? How do we now build a tool? And talking about challenges in terms of building Pyrsia, we have come so far, and we have these implicit trusts on these tools. We have these tool chains that are built on top of that, right? If I ask a Go developer to use a tool other than Go to download dependencies, they're never going to do that. If I ask a Jenkins user or a JFrog pipelines user to change their CI/CD scripts because I'm introducing Pyrsia, they will never do that. They'll never do that because not because they are hesitant, but because it involves so many changes in so many places. So Pyrsia aims to be frictionless in that way, so that you don't have to change the way you currently do things. If you look at our Pyrsia presentation that we did for DockerCon and then at the SwampUp, the version that we have built and integrated with Docker doesn't require you to change your Docker commands. You can still continue to use your Docker commands to pull images from Pyrsia network, which are then pulled from Docker Hub anyway. But you can just put Pyrsia in between. You'll get all the efficiencies of Pyrsia. You'll get all the certification. You'll get all the information that Pyrsia has just by using Docker commands for your CI/CD. If you wanted more information, there is also a Pyrsia CLI that is available to you. So you can do all these what you call housekeeping things and figure out what you can put in your BOM about the software you have built. So Pyrsia will be frictionless and also provide more value by providing unique interfaces.
Will we be approaching the binary providers, like NPM or Python? I mean, are we, PyPy or Docker? Are we going to be approaching them and saying, "Hey, we'd love for you to get involved in this and be able to go ahead and change"? I mean, we know it'd be tough for you to change the way you currently do things, but is this something you're looking to maybe get them involved? So we start building out a massive Pyrsia trust network with the actual binary providers themselves.
Yes, that is the intent. And that is where we started with Pyrsia. We started with Docker because we know that regardless of language you use, you are going to use a Docker image. So that was a very good place to start. We have a very good working relationship with Docker, and we had a good understanding of what needed to be built to make that integration work. So that is what you see today available. and it is going to be a what do you call it, a prototype for you to go and build similar integrations with npm, golang, and all of that. And we are engaging with communities via the Linux Foundation, so that we can actually work with the companies that are actually building these technologies. We announced the partnership with Oracle, and that's what we are having, working with Oracle on building it together, figuring out how the Java ecosystem can fit in, how the related ecosystems can fit in that run on top of Java, right? We are working with other library or language vendors to encourage them to come to Pyrsia and join. And the way we are building Pyrsia is that we will not be building every single language integration, because we are not the experts. We will build the ones we know. We work with the Docker team. That was a good experience for us. JFrog owns Conan, right? The C++ community repository. So we know a little bit about how that works. So we can help build that. But for other technologies, we will have an API so that those technology owners can come in and build that integration and release it for greater good.
And speaking of, I'm glad you mentioned that. And when we are working with Oracle, we have worked with Docker on this. And if I'm a company or I'm an individual that really wants to get involved in this, is there anything, first of all, number one, that I need to do to get involved? And I know we have the open source page and all that, well, that you talk about. But on top of that too, contributing to this and actually building this out, like, what can I do as, say, like as an individual contributor, or how can I, like I said, get my company involved in this, so this way I can be sure that, I'm doing my part? Because I always say this to people whenever I talk about security: I don't care what you use for your tools to make sure things are safe. I mean, we have a massive amount of customers here at JFrog, right? And there's customers I work with that I'm like, I'm their customer. So I always want to make sure that my stuff is personally safe too, right? I definitely have a vested interest making sure these companies do their job correctly, because they've got my stuff, right? And the thing is like, how do I, what can I do, or how do I get my company involved, or how do, if I want to, like, say like OWASP, I might have a local OWASP group, or I might be part of an npm community group, or like I said, or Python, or whatever. How do we get involved?
Yeah, so I'll answer this in two parts. So if you're an individual contributor, you just want to write good code, join a team that you are passionate about, like Pyrsia, and work on aspects of Pyrsia, please join our Slack channel. We are part of the OpenSSF Slack channel, and all that information is available on the Pyrsia.io. Our website is Pyrsia.io. You'll find all that information at the bottom of the website, where you'll find YouTube links, Twitter, and GitHub and Slack information. So go there, sign up, join the channels. We also have a team channel where we discuss team issues and what we are doing and where we are stuck and all of that. So if you wanted to get daily details, you can join that team channel. It's called Pyrsia_team. So join there, ask questions, and raise your hand and say, okay, this is something I like to work on, and I can help. We also went ahead and tagged a number of issues on our GitHub repository, and we call them good first issues. So you can just pick them up, send us a PR. That's a great way to get involved. We also have a beginnings of a website. Our website has a lot of information, but a lot of information can be added. A lot of information can be tuned so that it feels and reads well for you. So if you're passionate about that side of things, please just send us a PR, join one of our meetings, and you'll find all of that information on our website. So if you're an individual contributor in whatever capacity, just come join us, and we will accept any and all help.
Just like a standard open source community project.
Yeah,
just make sure you're
yeah.
Excellent. Yeah. So looking for passionate people who really want to make a difference. And this is really, this is something substantial. This is we understand the inherent risks of everything that we do. This is a way for you to become accountable for them.
Yeah, yeah. And like an open source project, our GitHub project is public. So you'll be able to just read things. If you just don't want to contribute yet, just go and see what we are doing if it makes sense for you. So in whatever capacity, welcome. And if you're an org, we want to engage in a more a specific way. Like, we want to make sure that if you have some certain goals of that you want to contribute and build certain APIs, we want to set it up in a way so that you feel comfortable joining the team. So we will actually do a white glove, onboarding for you. I'm very passionate about this because, this is where good things come together, right? So I want to make sure that it is done in the right way. So we will do a in-person onboarding. We'll do a session where we tell you about the details of how we are building it, how we want to engage, how we write tickets, what kind of meetings we have. Like we have stand-ups every day. We have a sprint planning meeting actually in another half an hour. So we do like normal agile processes. We also have a retrospective every 2 weeks, so you can come join us and find out what went well in the last 2 weeks and all of that. So you can have all those fun things. The other aspect that if you're an organization with some where you want to contribute to the infrastructure, we also want you to actually help us build such infrastructure and put it on the internet. Because as we said in our vision, this is not a JFrog owned. It cannot be a single company owned thing, right? It is by design distributed. It needs to be spread across the internet, and all of this has to be connected together and maintained by multiple entities so that it keeps on going regardless of whether these individual companies continue to fund it or not, right? So that's why we want to set you up well, so that the Pyrsia network itself succeeds. So in that case, please join the same things as I mentioned. Join our Slack channels and just raise your hand and say, okay, this is how we want to engage, and we'll jump into action and set things right for you. We got a few people joining via those channels. We got a few people as we did a couple of talks in some of the conferences. People raised their hands, and that's how you see the roster growing of the number of companies that are behind Pyrsia.
And speaking of, I mean, like I said, this isn't we're not having a huge long discussion. It's kind of a teaser, kind of like let everybody know, like I said, yes, we kicked this off. I'm an employee of JFrog. You're an employee of JFrog. But whenever I talk about security too, when I talk publicly and I do my talks and things like that, I always make sure to say, look, this is a community thing. And like you said, and this is a great community resource in which we're doing that, because my security is the same as your security, which is we want to make sure everybody is secure. We want to remove all the nefarious components. We want to have validation. We want the world to be a better place, right? Or make better place. It's like all the typical stuff you hear. Where do you really see the ultimate vision of Pyrsia, right? Because when I think about it, I mean, my brain starts going to wonderful places, right? I mean, where it's unicorn, sunshines, rainbows, and sunny days, right? Because the thing is that we built a massive infrastructure that could support a global, basically global scale. But at the same time, I want that level, like I said, of security where, every transaction I do, everything I do is a trust. And so for me, I could see a massive vision of this massive, almost independent of the internet in a way, where it's still utilizing the infrastructure of the internet, but this massive mesh of technologies that we use for this, blockchain in terms of ledgering, right? Not blockchain is in terms of everybody goes Bitcoin. But I mean, the benefit of blockchain is the immutable fact that you can have that ledgering of all the changes. And then of course, the certificate, validation when you do keys and all that kind of stuff. So leveraging the technologies that really matter. But where do you see the vision? What would you ideally, a year from now, 5 years from now, and into the future, what would you like to see? And also too, on top of that, is there any sort of warning in a way, right? Is there anything in your head that says this could all abruptly halt without this? So, I mean, I know we want to encourage people to do this, and this is not easy, right? This is a massive undertaking, but I think the benefits of a community effort could really bring this, into fruition.
Yeah. So anytime somebody asks me this question, I go like you said, go way into the future where everything is automated, where software is really liquid, where you and I don't worry about how software gets deployed. We don't worry about it because that happens at such a massive and fast pace that it is 100% automated. We need that kind of automation for a safe, secure, and better tomorrow. We can't have this gap between vulnerability discovered and vulnerability patched. We can't have this situation. We need lots of automation, and Pyrsia can be can be the motivator for that. Persia can provide all the elements that can power that automation, right? Meaning, I don't want to wait to find out, oh, you know what, log4j 5.1 has a vulnerability and is going to be patched in 3 days and blah, blah, blah. And find out myself by checking regularly whether it was patched, right? I want something automated. Persia can be that automated thing where it uses that ledger to tell people that, you know, this thing has been patched. Now you can automate, your automation can kick in, it can pull the latest, run through the pipeline, submit it to the customers, and customers won't even know, and they should not know.
So that's one of the big benefits then. So in other words, basically an automated remediation, right? It's not even automated per se, but at least letting you know that this vulnerability that might have affected you yesterday, today is actually been solved without you having to go in. And also too, will this also account for things such as similar items? And the reason why I bring this up is in some cases, there are some third-party resources that are old, outdated, haven't been updated in 10 years. Will we have the ability for it to also categorize any sort of data, because this might be an idea, categorize the data to say, here's the one that everybody's using, but it hasn't been updated in 10 years. Here's a different version that's been updated frequently, 6 times a year. It's not as popular. Do you want to suggest this to the creator of the initial package you're using to say, hey, you should swap over to this? Are we going to have that kind of ability to?
Persia will have all of the data, but Persia may not itself build all those intelligence layers, right? And we will we will enable all of that. We will keep that information out there. We'll have APIs which will help you build whatever kind of interrelation algorithms you want to build. And all of those can sit on top of Persia and leverage the data that is coming into Persia, right? All of that is possible. Today, it is impossible. Today, you have to build a tool for every single one of them, right? And that cannot be the future. We cannot we cannot live in that future because we cannot move at that pace.
I'd have to write crawlers that'd be like, hey, is there a new version available? Is there, I mean, that'd be nasty. So no, this makes sense. Okay.
Yeah. So that's how I'm looking at Persia, right? And being able to get out of the business of verifying software. Persia is verifying. You can just go to Persia and say, hey, can you tell me about this? And you will have a bunch of information and you can make a decision. You can write that automation and make a decision saying, oh, I trust this. And there might be situations where Persia will tell you all this information. You're like, oh, this is bad. Like you said, oh, this is 10 years old. I should not trust this. I want something that satisfies my criteria and which is latest in terms of development, latest in terms of updates and all of that, right? So you can jump to that, and Persia will be transparent about that. So we refer to that log that Persia is going to provide as, alternatively as transparency log, being really, really transparent. The best way to establish trust is transparency, not by all these mechanisms, right? I mean, there are all these mechanisms which will prove that you are you and all of that, but the best way to tell what you did well is by being transparent, and that log will be the transparency log that you can use to establish that trust.
Excellent. So this is great. And I'm so glad for all this information. And like I said, you mentioned like where you want to see it in the future and what the, the idyllic goal is going to be. And, and I'm glad we now have some information on how to get involved and really what it is. And I'm so happy to be involved in this on this side. I may not be wearing my Perseus shirt today, but I'm very happy to be involved in it because I think it's super important. I mean, the world, it's funny, is last year alone in 2021, there was a 650% increase in supply chain attacks. Think about that. That's terrifying. I mean, the pandemic, one of the things the pandemic brought was boredom. And in a lot of cases, I have a feeling that a lot of these increased attacks happen to be due to things like boredom. Hey, what am I going to do? I don't know. Let's see what fun we can have, right? And also removing things that are some of the typical, problems, such as typo squatting, dependency confusion, and all these kind of inherent things that we have there out in the world that we can try to fix and do it in a way and have it in a way that's even now become even more of a, I look at it as almost being its own separate layer out there for the development, where we just have this consistent layer of accessibility to the stuff we need to build the stuff we want to build, right? With a level of security and trust that is baked in. And I know that personally, this is not going to be an easy path, an easy route. And people shouldn't look at it that way, because the more and more we push security out as being the focal point, the more dangerous it becomes, right?
Yeah.
So that's the reason why I would encourage people to explore Pyrsia, to understand really deeply what it is. And we have plenty of good explanations on that. And we'll be also probably bringing in more and more people to discuss this. And this is, by the way, everybody who's watching this right now, this will only be the first discussion. This is not the end. This is just the beginning to kind of let you know there's something coming and you guys should be aware of it. And the man behind, the guy behind the helm of this crazy ship we're driving in terms of called Pyrsia is the guy that's sitting here with me right now, Sudhindra. But the thing is that this is everybody's responsibility. It's not just us as JFrog. We want companies to be involved. We want individuals to be involved. This is a group effort. We need to squash an issue that inherently endangers not only our data or the reputation of your company, but it could be individuals too, medical devices, right? Aviation, automotive. We start going into the things where people can die from software issues.
Yeah, absolutely.
Heavy industrial equipment. I mean, come on. One of the guys has been like, I've been working here for 10 years. Oh, don't mind the missing finger.
Missing finger, yeah.
But anyway,
yeah. And that's the thing, right? We are very passionate about the missing piece in this technology of open source software supply chain security. But we are aware that we are not the experts about all the pieces that you mentioned. We are not experts at Java. We are not experts at PHP, or we are not experts at Ruby or PyPy. We know how those technologies work, but we really are seeking help from the community and in building this thing that is really important for maintaining security and making sure our software continues to be as solid as we want it to be.
Excellent. Well, Sudhindra, I think this has been a fantastic talk and kicking off everything that we're doing here with Pyrsia. I encourage everybody to get involved. We're going to have more talks on this very soon. I think we should have another one where we start maybe even, I think in the next discussion, maybe we do a walkthrough of some of the inherent model characteristics behind it, how to use the API, the CLI. I think that'll be our next discussion. But at least we should get people involved, which I think this is actually going to be a very good job to do. And I appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to have this talk with me today. I look forward to our next discussion, and it's a real honor to be part of this project. I encourage everybody watching this to get involved in some way, spread the love, spread it out to other people in the industry. If you think, even if you're not personally wanting to get involved, I'm sure you know other people that will. I'll be actually giving a talk next week with her OWASP DevSlop, which is the OWASP, the global community aspect. I will be bringing it up in there as part of this discussion. But the thing is that everybody should be involved. Every company should at least have a key stake in this because you are stakeholders in security. So, but I appreciate your time. Thank you so much. Is there any words of wisdom before we end this discussion?
As you mentioned, we are also presenting Pyrsia at a few events happening this summer and fall. The first one coming up is Supply Chain Security Con, which is under the Linux Foundation banner. So if you are there, check us out. Talk to the people who are wearing this shirt. and it's easy to find. And as usual, just find us on Pyrsia.io. Really simple, easy to learn, easy to remember. It's like Pyrsia, but with a Y.
There you go. Excellent. Well, thank you so much for your time. Have a wonderful day. I look forward to our next discussion around this. And thanks everybody for watching. And like I said, go check it out and stay tuned for our next DevSecOps 101, which I'll be hosting next month or whenever it is. I'm not really sure, but keep in touch for that. Look out for the talks and look out for more expanded information on Pyrsia as we move forward. Thanks everybody for coming. Thank you, Sudhindra. Have a wonderful day. Be safe, be wonderful, be well. Cheers, everyone.